Alhamdulillah. So yeah, let me shift gears a little bit, and then so let me ask you, like, if you were to impart advice, with your experience and of course as being a youth and so forth, and growing in your deen and so forth, what kind of advice would you impart to our Muslim youth? Because we're dealing with a lot of craziness in our society right now with the onslaught of the LGBTQ ideology, among other issues such as youth violence. We're burying our youth. We're dealing with all kind of madness in our schools, outside of our schools, and in the society at large. So what kind of advice would you offer to the youth? And then maybe I'll get something for what you would say to parents after that.
Okay, well, so what I would say is, maybe this example will make sense. But if I see if I see storm clouds in the horizon, then I know it's going to rain. And then if I know it's raining and everybody's just standing outside and they're getting rained on, and I guess rain can be kind of like a metaphor for misery, discontentment, not being completely happy with one situation, then I could just sit out in the rain with them, or I can get an umbrella every time I see that cloud coming and get out of it. And I guess in this case, what I'm really talking about is being above everything. And how do you be above everything? Well, why is it we see people from the age of, 13 to, 19, 20, have all these problems, be discontented, have these issues, but we don't see people in their 30s having these issues. They're all humans. They live in the same city. They put their clothes on the same way. They go to the same messages. They eat. So what's the real problem? Well, the problem is, in my humble opinion, is a very evil concept that I believe is evil, and I believe is a word that I don't even like. We don't use in our household, and I'm not a sheikh. I can't give fatwa. But if I had more knowledge, maybe I would come to the conclusion that it's a haram concept, me personally, and that is the whole concept of being a teenager. Don't be a teenager. Be a young man or a young woman. And that might sound like such contrived advice, but there's a level of depth under that statement that is very deep. And if someone was to really explore what is the difference between a teenager and what is the difference between a young person, because that can confuse somebody. Because somebody will say, oh, if you're between 13 and 19, you're a teenager. And I'll say, absolutely not. And we'd have
and
to
what
take...
do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by that is, if we were to study where this whole concept of teenager came from, we'd have to do a historical lesson. When was this word first used? When was the word? When did the word teenager come about? The word teenager only came about after World War II. Now, what happened during World War II? This is the first time television became widespread, and advertising. Also, women are going out in the house in droves and working, and maybe people worked before then, but work became their main mission, as opposed to raising the family. Because during the war, people had to chip in, and a lot of things happened. So it just changed the fabric of society.
Women got in the workforce because
they got in the workforce, effort, and even after the war, people had this peace where after all that misery, we want to have a great time now. And now, the United States came out on top, so they got money, they got power. These other places are devastated. So now the youth, for the very first time in American history, they have more free time than they ever had. Their parents, the car became, it's widespread. They give them the car keys. Now you can go out, you can do things, and you have all this freedom, but you're not considered an adult. And you're not considered an adult because these marketing companies came up with this concept of teenager, because they had to, with this shift that happened in the world, they had to have a way of explaining these type of things. So they labeled these group of people who aren't children, they're not adults, they called them teenagers, and they're like Peter Pans, like the people that never grow up. So basically, and it's a very important statement that I like to quote it directly, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's a very interesting article, and it was written by Dr. Michael Platt, but he wrote this article on a website. It was home-school.com, and I just want to read the first part of it. And he says, and this has always resonated with me after I read this, and I think that this sums up the problem and the advice that I would give youth, young men and young women. You want to have a happy, wholesome life and live a life of peace and ease, choose not to be a teenager. And maybe this will make it clear. It starts off, we have two teenagers. I sometimes hear parents say, "Oh, I'm so sorry," I sometimes reply. Although I say it with a smile, the truth is sad. While the growing up process is inevitable, natural, and God-given, the process of children turning into teenagers is not. The teenager was invented, fashioned, permitted, let loose, you might say, by the generation of our parents and grandparents, discovering that may help us to raise our children differently. And I'll just conclude with this real quick. So first, I just want to touch on that. So here, this particular person is saying it's a concept that is invented, and so that's interesting. Invented by who? You know, as when we go to other places in the world, is this a natural word that they have? Teenager? Do they have this concept? So it goes on. There were no teenagers before World War II. Ask those still living who raised their children before then, or spend a rainy Saturday in the basement of your library comparing old life magazines from before the war and after. Instead of teenagers, there were youths. Youths were young people who wanted to become adults. However confused, wayward, or silly they acted, however many mistakes they made, they looked to the future. They knew the adult life was different than a child's life. And then it goes on. And I encourage people, take a look at the articles, not that long. Myth of the Teenager, homeschool-world.com. Very interesting article. So I would say to the youth, make a decision not to be a teenager. Do the opposite. Our religion teaches us to do the opposite of what non-Muslims do. And we should do the opposite. And part of that, doing the opposite of what non-Muslims do, to make your life easier and to accept the guidance of Allah, who has the best plan for you, and the teachings of our Prophet, or the final Prophet, I should say, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is, make a decision to be above that and don't follow that program. Just, you have to be above it. See, when you're above it, you don't care about wearing, I don't know what the latest shoes are, but whatever the latest shoes are, you don't bug your parents for those shoes. You wear, you don't want to wear something, you get clowned all the time, but you're not, you don't seek, you're not spending so much time seeking fun, you're seeking contentment. You're not spending so much time trying to fit in. You're trying to think towards the future on how can I set myself up for success? What moves can I make now? If everybody is going out and they're doing this on the weekends, let me do this because I'm thinking of the future. As the author was saying, he was saying the so-called teenager, the thing they fear the most is death. The second thing is having a child, because child means responsibility. You not having control over doing what you want. You can't have the time to just chill and do whatever you want. But the people that are the least happiest are the people that have the most free time, and they have the most amount of freedom. Youth and children, they need guidance. They need elders. But what happens is we live in a world, and they're not saying this, or the article, but I'm saying this, is that we live in a world kind of where people don't transition anymore. You go to these cultures, you see they have these rites of passage where there's a transition period from like childhood to young person to adult. And it seems as if there's not a lot of transition happening. So it's almost like teenagers giving birth to teenagers giving birth to teenagers. And I think that's why we're in the situation that we're in right now.
Well, what's the harm, though? Somebody might ask, well, what's the harm? So what if I call myself a teenager, and how does that affect my future and what I'm doing? So what if they're advertising and targeting me? What's going on with that?
So in our religion, we're taught there's different worlds. There's the world of jinn, the world of men. There's different worlds, but we can also look at it. There's different cultures. Usually, we think of cultures. We think, okay, this person has African American culture, or American culture, or Desi culture, or this person has Asian culture. But there's other cultures within society, subcultures. There's a culture of fun. There's a culture of, like we said, discontentment. There's a culture of, the constant acquiring of more material things. The teenager philosophy is a culture, and this is what's saying it's not a natural stage of life. Yes, youth are awkward. Youth make silly decisions. Youth make dumb decisions that we scratch our heads. Being more mature, we look at, why do they do that? Why do they say that? Why are they thinking that? What are they, what are they doing? That's natural. We're not disagreeing with biology. Yes, they say that your brain doesn't fully develop till like 25, and yes, we understand that. But the culture of being a teenager, of shopping on these stores and getting the latest shoes and the latest music and spending all your time just seeking pleasure, and
no responsibility.
No responsibility. That is not the path of happiness and ease. That is actually, even though it seems like it's the complete opposite, it's the path of unhappiness. And and that's why people need elders to kind of to guide them, tell them no. It's like the person who just eats all the sugar and things they want. It's fun for now. Eat all the sugar and things you want, but when you get diabetes or something, or you're overweight and you're not really happy, you're gonna wish that you had some discipline. But people that don't discipline themselves, society is gonna find a way to discipline that person, one way or another. The prison filled with people who their parents failed to discipline them, or they couldn't discipline themselves, so society disciplines those people. And the society is going to discipline. You're going to get disciplined one way or another. So what we have to do is discipline ourselves. So that's why I would say to the parents, there's a saying, you can choose an ounce of prevention, or you can deal with a pound of regret later. And if you don't have that prevention in your household, and you get rid of this evil concept of teenager, and you say, hey, in this house we have young men and young women who are going to looking forward to getting married one day, having families, and being able to provide for themselves, and going against the normal flow of things. And I think that's the problem. A lot of people, they don't know the steps to take in order for their youth to navigate these situations. And there's answers there. There's steps. What to do, youth is things gone wrong. They got addicted to drugs. There's steps to take. Your child is going to high school. How can you make sure that they don't enter a cycle of poverty and incarceration? There's steps that you can take. But the first thing to do is to realize that there's a problem and what the problem is. We know the shaitan is our enemy, and the shaitan speaks through the media. So a good step that we could take is reduce media when they're young. That's a good step. Don't have a TV in your house when they're young. I'm not saying that within itself is the answer, but I'm saying that there's different steps. So that's one step. Another step, these young men, you always talk to them who are going into prison. I'm sure you would say that there's a connection between, sometimes, would you agree? People that are on the street, they're running around, do they look for sources of, would you say, incomes a lot of times when they're out in these streets, or is it only just party and hang, or do they find themselves doing illegal things to make money? Is that a part of? Because I know you're an expert in the prison and things.
Yeah, definitely. That they're searching for easy money, and preying on others to get that, whether it's through selling drugs or robbing people and robbing stores and stuff like this.
So what if these young men, at the time they turn 13 years old, we start teaching them a skill. So by the time they're 15, they're at a professional level where they can do that skill at a professional level. Maybe they don't have mastery. Maybe they're not considered world-class experts. But they have a skill, and they can act in a junior type level, a junior professional level. And then from there, you're doing something from the age of 15, from 13 all the way to the age of 18, with the goal of having mastery at the age of 18. What does that do for a person's psychology? What does that do for their confidence? What does that do? They say the best way, or I like to say, anything in life, the best way to be, to gain mastery at something is you have to gain inconsistency in other things. Now that people might find that an interesting statement, but for you to gain mastery at something, like say you want to really be a really good reciter of the Quran. Okay, if you want to master it, master studying mustalah hadith and understanding fiqh and aqidah and these type of things, and really have good knowledge. Okay, you're gonna have to become inconsistent with wasting your time, inconsistent with mutual, always having So you can only gain mastery with inconsistency, and while you cut out these things that are making you inconsistent, then you become consistent in the important things. So part of it is at the age of 13, we need to start teaching people practical skills. It's not so much about certifications. It's about, and this might make a little bit more sense. So there was a point, I was dissatisfied with the type of work I was doing, money I was making, stuff like that. So what I did was I went to this website. It's called www.freecodecamp.com. And a friend of mine got me interested in it. I saw him learning. He was also dissatisfied. And we used to have different hustles and stuff, trying to make money, selling rugs on the street and doing different things. And I saw him starting to program. And he went to this website. It's free. It's called www.freecodecamp.com. And, he started getting good at programming. I think eventually he went on to going to one of these coding boot camps. But after he got out, he said, you know what? If a person was to just do free code camp, they would get everything out of it that they get out of these $8,000, $20,000, $40,000 boot camps. And I can attest to that. Because I went through free code camp and ended up getting I started doing interviews. People actually started interviewing me and stuff. And then eventually I got my first job with the help of the connection, but it was the portfolio that I was building through Free Code Camp. So the whole point is not so much freecodecamp.com, but a person can earn a high wage if they can have a portfolio where they don't have to explain so much about what they're capable of. They could say, listen, I know this job says an engineer should have a bachelor's degree, you should have this, and you should have that. And we could replace software engineering with anything. But I know I don't have these certificates, but you know what I have? If you would just look here, look at these, look at what I have done. This job says you're looking for someone to do this and has this certification. I don't have this certification, but here's the proof that I have already built a practical working example of the type of work that you do. And I put it in my portfolio. So now I have a portfolio that does all the talking and shows that I can practically do the work you want me to do without me having to talk so much. And that's a very interesting concept that I've learned from Free Code Camp. So there's a lot of things like that. So I think the youth, they should, and these things they'll teach, the parent doesn't have to learn these things. They teach you. All you need to do is encourage them in a way where it's not a battle, where, we're forcing you to do this. It has to be, you're the elder. You should be more, have some wisdom to be able to get people where they want to do it themselves. It's like, when I used to do some counseling, there's a concept of motivational enhancement where, you ask people questions so that they come to conclusions of things. Right. Instead of you telling them, oh, my parents are always on my back, and I got arrested and it's my parents' fault and it's this fault. And, when the police came, why didn't they arrest your mother? Right. Because she didn't do anything. Oh, okay. But you was the one using drugs and you were out stealing and stuff. Do you think that has something to do with the reason you got arrested? Well, yeah, I was out doing the wrong thing. Oh, okay. All right. I'll just take note of that. And just now, now they kind of come into realizations on things themselves without me battling them. And it's the same way to get people to learn skills is talk to them about poverty. What type of life do you want? Do you always want to work for somebody your whole life? There's nothing wrong with working your whole life if you have a good career or anything. But it's a good position where you put yourself in a position where you can work a high earning income, but you also have the opportunity to start your own business. And the best time for you to start that business, in my opinion, is when you don't have responsibilities, you don't have family. So why don't we lay out so we're going to lay out a path so that you can do that. Does that make sense? Do you understand when I say poverty? Let me show you some examples of it. And then really talk about poverty. Talk about showing how people, when they wake up and they don't have a skill and they're in their 40s or 30s and they can't do the type of things they want to do, how that can affect their life and their happiness. We know the risk comes from Allah. We know and we believe in the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we also believe in affecting the causes for a good outcome, right?
No.
The fact, like,
Of course. Having a suburb. Now, let me a last question. So, how does this rethinking and this how does a single mother who has to navigate, take care of her children, struggle trying to raise her family? She could be a single Muslimah or even a non-Muslim that is struggling, dealing with young people in her house or young kids and stuff. How does she's got to work maybe 2 jobs just to make it. So how does she instill these?
That's a good question. And, may Allah reward the all the mothers, the sisters who are mothers. May Allah reward them and make things easy for them, because it's a jihad every day for a woman, So I would say there's 2 ways to that. The first way is, when I say learning skill, I mentioned like a website, free code camp. But it could be a lot of different things. But the point is that we live in a world of free information and technology, and people can learn these skills, and they can just go online to a website that will teach them, and with the right amount of frustration, because frustration is important. Because when you get a real job in the real world, people don't like to hold your hand with different things. They like people that are capable and can figure out things themselves. And that's where self-learning comes into play. So you don't need to necessarily know these type of things and be an expert for your child to do it. You just need to encourage them to do it and give them a reason why they need to do it for their own means. So that's one way. So setting some time aside and having maybe another family member we can bring in, even hire a coach or somebody to make sure that these people are staying on the path and learning these things. And if you're working 2 jobs and things of this nature, it's like somebody once said to me a long time ago, hey, you don't want to go through the effort of learning new skills or things, but time is going to pass. It's going to pass whether you learn new skills and you learn new things or not. The only difference is you're going to put the work in or not. And it's the same thing. Okay, you're working 2 jobs. You don't really have a lot of time to be with your kids. Okay, well, either way, you're still not having that time, but you could still encourage them and make it easy. Give them a laptop, have a computer, and maybe put some parental type tracking on there. Have a family member come over if you have a family member. Basically, just do the best you can and try to engineer a good situation and not let things just fold out. Not put your hands in the air. Everybody's situation is different. Yeah. Some people have different resources. Some people have really strong families where they can rely on their grandmother. Maybe the children can go to their grandmother's house and be homeschooled or be unschooled, which might be better in some cases. You got to look at your local laws. Unschooling is you're not following any curriculum. You're just, hey, an hour of math a day so they can get really good at math and following a curriculum. And then, an hour with a Quran teacher. And then, another hour of good writing. And then the next hour, learning, going to udacity.com and finishing their marketing course. So they get done, they get a certificate in marketing, but they have portfolio that they built proving that they understand marketing, and they have things that they can build and they can show, or finishing a programming type of thing. So the point is it's about doing these self-learned programs where they have practical, because it's not about these certificates. It's not about certificates. It's about portfolios. I can prove that I can do this practically, and doing the best you can according to your situation, because time is going to pass. There's going to be problems no matter what. But all you have to do is look at your resources and the people in your life, and don't try to do it yourself if you're single. Because, I like, for instance, I used to have a business, and it was called Muslim Sober Companion, right? And what it was is when I went to Egypt, some time after Daytona Beach, when I went to Daytona Beach, I was working at a job on the fire department, and then I ended up getting married, and we went overseas. I remember before I left, somebody was saying, man, there's a lot of addiction problems, and it's just underground people don't know about. And I remember going to Egypt, and I remember talking to somebody once who seemed like he was high. I was like, man, even here are these problems. And I remember coming back, and I wanted to do something. I wanted to have meaningful work. And I said, I want to do something. So instead of waiting for like some perfect solution or something, Treatment centers can be expensive, having the right people and the right things. So I started looking out what Christians are doing that are solving their issues, because a lot of these societal problems comes from the West. They do. So they have to develop some sort of answers into it. So I saw that they had these like addiction coaching programs. So I went through one of those programs, got a certificate, and I started a company called Muslim Sober Companion, where I would come and live with you if you have an addiction in your family, and help you with these things. And I would also take phone calls and give advice to women who maybe their husbands are addicted, or their families, or a father might call, and I try to give them advice on how to help with the situation. And this is a long kind of drawn out way to say, sometimes a mother would call and I can do nothing, it might be somebody in a foreign country, because I would take calls from all over the world, and she'll be like, I don't have any resources, and nobody even takes me serious in this family, and my children are now going astray because their father is he's an alcoholic, and what can I do? I can't do anything, and I can't afford any services or anything. But and I would tell, like, in a summary, is just how, like, there's a sickness, there's a cure. Allah, if there's a sickness in this world, Allah gives us answers to things. And the first thing to do is not to catastrophize your situation. You can only do what you can do, but the best things start with a plan. Have a plan and try to work the plan. You could first start by not being an enabler. That's the first. That's the first thing that anybody can do. Okay, there's a situation. I don't have the answer to it. Well, at least you can do is not be a person that is adding to it and enabling the person. Yeah. So in the case of, the husband who is addicted to alcohol, don't do anything for that person, and it could be a child. Don't do anything for that person you wouldn't do for them if they didn't have an addiction issue. So like what happens is somebody has someone who's addicted to something in their family, and they're like, oh, I'm going to help them, let him stay here. He can eat and get things together. But what did you just do? Now that person's not paying rent. They don't have to cook. You're cooking for them because they're a child. In your culture, you feel like the mother has to take care of the child even if they're doing the wrong. So they're not feeling any negative results of their action. So if so now you can drink, use drugs, and you don't have to work, and your family's taking care of you. Why should you change? People change when we hear this concept of rock bottom, where things are so bad. Now I have no choice. I have nothing. My whole family was burnt down and everything. But we don't have to wait for people to reach rock bottom. We can raise the bottom, and we raise the bottom by helping them to get hit by the consequences of their actions, by having rules and contracts. You break this rule and we don't go back on it. So in this household, we don't use drugs. You use drugs. I find drug paraphernalia in this house. I see you come back in the house, and it's you gotta pray Isha in this house. You don't pray Isha in this house. Every time you do that, you gotta stay gone for 3 weeks. I don't know where you're gonna stay. Maybe under a bridge. Maybe get chased by dogs. Maybe get shot by drug dealers. But I'll make dua for you. But I'm not giving you any money. I'm not helping you. We're gonna have a contract. Every time you break this contract, you gotta leave. I'm gonna call the police. If you show up, you gotta have consequences. But if you're here, we're gonna help you have a recovery plan for your addiction, which means, hey, go to Jummah every Friday. The first sujood of every salah until the day you die, we're gonna dedicate it to addiction recovery. You're in sujood, you're close to Allah. Allah help me with this addiction, because people insan comes from nesya, right? Nesyan, yeah. It's our nature to forget, right? So people in recovery for addiction problems, they forget. So you need something to help remind you. So you remind yourself in that first sujood of salah, and then you need a recovery plan where you have a library of books, of addiction books, and that's anybody who's trying to recover from an addiction issue, they don't have a library of books, they're not serious. You got to have a book. You need to do some journaling, and it's good if you can be with somebody like a life coach or addiction coach or some sort of program that you meet where people help you to stay on that path, to remember that you're in recovery, and you can speak with, and they can ask you questions so you can clarify ideas and come up to your own answers with things. So when we have these type of things, we have a recovery plan. So if we're running into these type of problems, like we have people, because when we talk about teenagers, it always leads one way or another to drugs a lot of times, But what is addiction? Every parent should know what an addiction is before there's any type of issue in their family. Because people are not addicted to alcohol, crack, cocaine, pornography. They're not addicted to that. That's not what the addiction is. See, that's what people think the addiction is. And I'd like to just read something really short I wrote maybe about 6 years ago for a website. Maybe it was About Islam or, I think I have it here. About Islam. Okay. So I wrote an article, and for the youth, they wanted me to write something for the youth. So I think it's just best, let me just read this instead of just trying to put it together. So somebody wrote and they asked this question, and I think that this could be of benefit to anybody. Assalamu alaikum. I am suffering from drug addiction. I usually use hashish. I sometimes drink alcohol too. I'm getting away from Islam. I plan to improve myself, but I feel I can't. I'm getting worse, grades in college. Sometimes I'm very motivated to change, but it doesn't last for long. The biggest problem is that I'm getting away from Islam. Please guide me how to deal with this problem. So, and I get I used to get answers like this worded in all type of different ways, right? So I said, people aren't addicted to drugs, alcohol, crack, heroin. They're not addicted to that. They're addicted to something else. And maybe this will help clarify. So here's the answer that I gave. I said, Assalamu alaikum, brother. Some people ask for advice just to feel better, and some ask because they are ready to do whatever it takes to change their situation. I hope you are the latter. The Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, what could mean a Muslim is not stung from the same hole twice. It means a Muslim should be on the alert and benefit from his or her experience to avoid mistakes in the future. But what if you have a relapsing brain disorder where you don't learn from your mistakes and have a compulsion that drives you to do haram things that you really don't want to do? This is the case with addiction-related issues. A person with an addiction has a destructive, powerful habit where the brain justifies a love-hate relationship with something that can predictably change their mood. And that's what they're addicted to. The mood change. It's like pressing a button. I feel sad, I feel lonely, I feel bored, I feel ashamed. Let me press this button. They're addicted to the mood change, not the cigarette, the alcohol, and all these things. And this might clarify a little bit more. This love-hate relationship weakens the willpower and faith of the person, the two things people rely on to get out of a bad situation. This lack of power gives the person shame and pain. Part of the person wants to quit, the other doesn't. Many good people struggle with this issue who work a variety of fields. Some are doctors, some are lawyers, some are students, some are high school students who are addicted to different things. So this is the addictive cycle. The person experiences pain. The person wants to get high to experience pain. They get high, or they act out. That could be gambling, that can be shopping, whatever it is, right? So they get high. They get pain and trouble from getting high. The person wants to get high to escape the pain. They get high. They get pain and trouble from getting high. The person wants to get high to escape the pain. They get high. It's a cycle. So they're feeling bad. They're feeling lonely. They're feeling shame because they're thinking about the past, and there's nothing but guilt in the past. You think about the future. There's nothing but anxiety, but they're not living in where they have the power in the present. So they enter this cycle because every addiction issue has a trigger, an action, and a reward system. If you attack one of those things, that addiction problem is going to fall down. Sure. So this is what we need to tell, these youth that are having these type of issues. You need to write a recovery plan with your own hand, and reach out for help. Have some addiction books. Go to Jummah. Dedicate the first sujood to Salat. Do journalism. Every night, do some journaling. The first page of your journal should have all those things you've accomplished in your life, so the things you've accomplished and you feel good about. So when you're having those difficult times, I've done difficult things in my time. Write about some lessons you learned that day. Your journal is a objective laboratory for your thoughts and your ideas, so that you can affect change in things. And then, you want to work out, and the next thing you want to do is ask yourself, what do I need to get better? And do that thing, Because sometimes people, it's like learning skateboard tricks, like kick flips, right? Both of us, we used to skateboard, still skateboard. Somebody can tell you, hey, I'm trying to learn how to do kick flips. Okay, you need to do it like this and do it like that and do it like that. And I can listen to your advice, But it's not until I start getting on that skateboard and trying to do tricks that I can really get anywhere.
Right.
So you need to reach out to experts and write your own recovery plan and ask yourself what do you need to do and take the advice of those experts. And when you do that, inshallah, you're going to get better with dua. Inshallah. So that's how I would tell people that are struggling with these type of issues like addiction issues. First, know what the problem is. There's no such thing as a teenager. Seek contentment, not fun. They don't need so much time by themselves. Don't be a teenager. Choose not to be a teenager. Just make a decision to be a young man. Have your children spend more time with adults than youth. Yes, children should have some time with some youth here and there, but they don't need to be in the majority of their time. And they need to have a plan. They need to know that you're gonna get out of the house one day and you're gonna need to take care of yourself. And when you start talking to people like that and have a conversation, they on themselves start getting a little natural, healthy worry about the future. That maybe you can't stay here forever. You might have to go out. And I'm not suggesting this Western concept of kicking people out when they're 18 or anything like that. But I'm just saying you're gonna have to take care of yourself at some point. So why don't we need to get you started while you don't have responsibility? Because it does not make sense to me that a person goes to school from kindergarten to high school and they graduate and they still don't have a way of making money. To me, I cannot understand this concept. It doesn't make any sense to me. Something is wrong. Something is broken. Why follow that system? So that's how I think about it, and I'm adamant about it.
Jazakallah khairan. Allah yabarak fikum for your insight, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you and bless you with ikhlas, with the battle of sunnah and Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Wa jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.